I don't remember the first time she turned me down. It must have been somewhere in the middle of the routine after the second surgery, before the tubes. She said she was tired. I said I understood. It was a quiet exchange, the kind people have when both know there's no point arguing. I didn't expect it to sting the way it did. I was used to her silences, but this one was shaped differently, sharper, more final. Every night after that, I'd watch her fold the blanket at the foot of the bed, smooth it out like a habit. She'd avoid looking at me while doing it. Her hands moved quickly, methodically, like she was wrapping up a shift. Then she'd sit in the chair near the window, phone in hand, eyes lit by the dim screen glow, pretending to scroll. I'd ask small questions just to hear my own voice. She'd answer with a nod, sometimes not at all. The machines filled in the silence. The rhythm of the beeping almost became conversational. I started to measure her indifference against the sound of my own heart rate. When the monitor slowed, she seemed calmer. I wondered if she noticed. One night, I asked if she'd stay a little longer after visiting hours. She said no, too quickly, like she'd been waiting for the question only to reject it. Her eyes flicked to the nurse's station when she said it, as if needing someone else to witness her refusal. It made me wonder who she was performing for. I didn't ask again. I just watched her fingers tap the phone, the way her lips pressed together when she was done talking. Every rejection took a different shape but landed the same. Flat, measured, polite. After a while, she didn't need to say anything. I could see it before she opened her mouth. Her movements carried the refusal now. The way she stood by the door, bag already on her shoulder. The way she kept her coat folded over her arm, never putting it down. I learned to recognize that posture the way people recognize weather. A storm signal you stop trying to read because you already know how it ends. The nurses liked her. They said she was patient, attentive. She smiled at them, those quick, weightless smiles she used to give me. They thought we were close. I didn't correct them. I liked hearing them call her devoted. It gave me a kind of borrowed warmth. But when the door shut behind them, the air changed again. She'd shift in her seat, cross her legs, glance at the clock. It wasn't cruelty. It was absence, perfectly maintained. Some nights she'd doze off in the chair, arms crossed, chin tucked down. I'd watch her chest rise and fall and think how strange it was to feel lonelier with her there than without her. I'd imagine her at home, in the apartment, the way she'd move through the kitchen, how she'd pour water, touch her hair, check her reflection in the glass door. I'd picture her doing those things and feel like I was intruding, like she belonged to a version of herself that existed only beyond the hospital walls. I began to notice the patterns, the way she'd touch her ring before leaving, the way she'd double-check her phone notifications before saying goodbye, the small rehearsals of detachment. It was clinical, efficient, almost admirable. I wondered if she practiced it somewhere, in front of a mirror, maybe, the way people rehearse smiles for photographs. Once, a nurse came in while we were both silent. She looked between us, said something about love being a kind of medicine. My wife smiled at that. A polite, practiced expression. The nurse left. The smile faded before the door clicked shut. I wanted to ask her what she thought about that comment, whether she still believed love had any power left, but I knew how she'd answer. She'd tilt her head slightly, pretend to consider it, then say something neutral like maybe. That was her favorite word lately, maybe. It meant nothing. It was her way of keeping distance without sounding cruel. I started to catalog her maybes. I wrote them down on the back of the discharge forms, the spare napkins from the food tray. There was something precise about it, like charting symptoms. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe to prove to myself that I was still observing, still capable of measuring something. One night, I asked if she missed me. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "You're right here." It was the kind of answer that closes doors. I said nothing. The machines kept their rhythm. She checked her phone again. The room light buzzed faintly, the fluorescent hum sinking into the silence. I realized then that the quiet between us wasn't accidental. It was curated, maintained like a clean wound. She didn't want noise, not from me. She wanted me still, contained. I began to test that idea. I'd shift slightly, cough, ask questions I already knew the answers to. Each time, her responses grew shorter, her patience thinner. I learned the borders of her tolerance like a map, and yet, there was a strange pull in it. Watching her withdraw became its own kind of intimacy. I started to crave her indifference. It was the only form of attention she still gave freely. When she left each night, I'd listen to her footsteps fade down the hall. The rhythm of her heels on the tile became something I anticipated. I could tell her mood by the pace. Some nights brisk, almost angry. Others slow, reluctant. Those nights were worse. They made me believe, for a moment, that something still tethered her here. That illusion was enough to keep me quiet. One evening, she stayed longer than usual. The monitors had been acting up. The nurse said it was just interference, but she looked uneasy. My wife sat there, arms folded, eyes unfocused. I tried to thank her for staying. She didn't reply, just kept watching the machines, like she was waiting for them to stop. It was a small thing, a fleeting look, but it stayed with me. The stillness in her face, the way her lips parted slightly, as if she was almost disappointed when the beeping resumed its steady pace. That was when I started to understand. Not all rejection comes from words. Sometimes it's in what people don't flinch at. She didn't flinch at the thought of me gone. She only flinched when I kept living. After that, I stopped asking, stopped reaching, stopped trying to reclaim something already spent. I just observed. Every visit, every sigh, every carefully timed glance at the clock. I started to find calm in the precision of it. The slow erosion of connection, predictable and neat. I realized I no longer wanted her to love me. I just wanted to see how far she'd go to avoid pretending. Each night, I let her leave without a word. I watched the door close, counted the seconds before the hallway light faded. The silence afterward wasn't painful anymore. It was clean, familiar, like air after a storm. The nurses thought I was getting better. They said my vitals were stabilizing. I smiled and agreed. In a way, they were right. Something inside me had leveled out. The peaks were gone. Only the flatline feeling remained. Not death, just steadiness. She brought flowers one day. They smelled too strong for the sterile air. I asked why. She said the nurse suggested it. I knew it wasn't her idea. Still, I thanked her. She didn't answer. She never stayed long enough to see them wilt. That night, I watched the petals curl and darken. The scent lingered long after she left. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing the pattern of the cracks. I thought about her face when she thought I wasn't watching. The faint impatience, the quiet relief every time a doctor mentioned monitoring or observation period. I wondered what she pictured when she heard those words. Maybe peace, maybe freedom. I didn't blame her. I only wanted to understand the shape of her wish. That's when I began to plan what came next. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel, just something quiet, precise, like the rhythm of a heart monitor. It started with the sound of the machines again, the steady, indifferent rhythm. I began to listen the way some people pray. Each tone had meaning. Each pause carried weight. I told myself I was just passing time, but it became something else. I started counting the intervals between beeps, then the breaths between her visits. I measured her absence in hours, then in heartbeats. It felt cleaner that way, precise. The nurses said recovery was a process of patience. I thought of it more as waiting for proof that the world still noticed me. I began writing down times, gestures, phrases, not hers, not anymore mine. The way my hand trembled when I reached for the cup, the way the air smelled after the night shift mopping, the way the window light shifted over the wall. Small, useless details that I couldn't stop cataloging. It was a way of proving I was still observing something, that I hadn't disappeared. Days blurred. Visits came and went. I started to think of her less as a person and more as a rhythm too, another sound among the machines, predictable, contained. I wondered if she thought of me at all once she left the building. Probably not, but that wasn't the point anymore. The point was understanding the pattern, how something once essential could become background noise. I began to test myself. I'd close my eyes and imagine her sitting in the chair, the smell of her perfume faint but there, the small clink of her ring against the phone screen. I tried to picture her voice saying my name. It took effort. Sometimes I couldn't recall it clearly. That failure frightened me at first. Then it started to calm me. Forgetting became its own quiet relief. The doctors said I was improving. They talked about discharge dates. I nodded but didn't answer. The thought of leaving didn't feel like progress. Out there was noise, motion, choices. In here, everything stayed measured, slow, precise. I liked that. I liked knowing the sequence of things, the orderlies changing shifts, the cleaning staff's laughter at 11:15, the faint scent of disinfectant that came with morning. Routine held me steady. It dulled the rest. One afternoon, she came later than usual. She looked tired, distracted. She spoke to the doctor in the hallway, not to me. I watched their shadows move behind the curtain. When she finally came in, she said something about work, then about scheduling. Her words drifted past me like static. I realized I wasn't listening. I was counting her blinks instead. 7 in 30 seconds. Even, calm, detached. I wondered if she could sense what I was doing, if she felt me measuring her in silence. Probably not. People rarely notice when you stop listening. She stayed 15 minutes. I knew that without checking the clock. I felt the exact moment she decided to leave, the slight shift in her posture, the breath before the polite phrase, "I'll come tomorrow." Tomorrow had stopped meaning anything. It was just another marker, another repetition. When the door closed, I didn't feel the usual drop in temperature. I just felt level, balanced. The beeping resumed its rhythm. For the first time, I matched my breathing to it on purpose. It steadied me. I spent the next nights doing that, synchronizing breath with sound. It gave me something to control, something predictable. When sleep came, it was shallow, but it was clean. Dreams felt like static. There were no faces, no voices, only the mechanical pulse of the room. The nurses said it was good. Rest was good, but I could tell they didn't like how still I'd become. One of them asked if I was bored. I said no. Boredom meant wanting something. I didn't want anything anymore. She smiled politely, the way people do when they think you're not trying hard enough. I didn't correct her. The less they expected, the easier it was to maintain the calm. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and imagine the sound of her shoes in the hallway. A faint echo, like memory still rehearsing itself. I never checked if it was real. It didn't matter. The difference between memory and presence was small here. Both passed through the same dim light. Both vanished at the same pace. One night, the power flickered. The machines went silent for half a second. The kind of silence that feels bottomless. My chest tightened, not from fear, exactly, but from the realization of how much I depended on the noise. When the power returned, I almost laughed. The sound of the monitor came back, patient, unbothered. I whispered thank you to it. I'm not sure why. It wasn't gratitude, more like recognition. The nurses came running in. They checked the wires, the readings. I said I was fine. They didn't believe me, but I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt clear. The flicker had shown me something, the brief version of absence I'd been circling around. Total quiet. No rhythm. No waiting. Just the pause itself. I started thinking about that silence more often. What it meant. How it might feel to hold it a little longer. Not to escape anything, but to see what it was like when everything else stopped asking for attention. The idea stayed with me. Gentle, steady. She kept visiting, out of habit more than care. I could tell. Her voice softened sometimes, out of pity maybe. I let her think I didn't notice. Pity had its own warmth, faint but serviceable. I used it the way you use hospital blankets, not for comfort, just to reduce the cold. When she left one night, she forgot her scarf on the chair. I watched it for hours. The pattern of the fabric, the way it slumped slightly to one side. In the dim light, it almost looked like a person sitting there. I didn't call the nurse. I didn't mention it the next day when she came back. She didn't ask about it either. She just picked it up, folded it neatly, and left again. That was when I understood she wasn't pretending anymore. The rituals were fading. The performance was ending. I felt no anger, only the faint sense of completion, like a circuit closing. The doctors kept talking about progress, but I'd stopped listening. Recovery had begun to sound like noise too. The world outside was waiting, but I wasn't sure for what. Each night I waited for the flicker again, the momentary blackout, the half-second of absolute quiet. It didn't come. Still, I could feel it near, like something just beyond the wall. The idea of it steadied me. I didn't want to chase it. I just wanted to be ready when it arrived. Ready to notice the moment when everything stopped moving, when every sound folded into silence, and I could finally see what was left. They said I could leave on Friday. I nodded. The nurse smiled like that was good news. I didn't tell her I'd stopped thinking in terms of days. I only measured things by sound now, the drip, the hum, the click of shoes on the tile. The calendar meant nothing. She came to pick me up. She'd already signed the forms. The car ride was quiet. She asked if I felt strong enough to walk to the apartment. I said yes. She didn't ask anything else. I watched the city move past the window, the way people hurried without looking at each other. The noise felt distant, like it belonged to another time. When we got home, everything looked smaller. The air smelled unfamiliar. I wondered if she'd changed something. The furniture was the same, but the space between things had shifted. That's what I noticed first, the gaps. They felt deliberate. She helped me sit down, asked if I wanted tea. I said no. She turned away quickly, relieved to have something to do. I watched the way she moved, how careful she was not to brush against me. The same quiet choreography from the hospital, only now without witnesses. I realized then that she'd built her own routine while I was gone, a private rhythm that didn't include me. I couldn't blame her. Everyone adapts. She placed a glass of water near my chair. When she walked away, I watched the condensation bead and slide down. The sound of the refrigerator hum filled the silence. It was almost the same as the machines. Almost. I began counting again without meaning to. Breaths, drops, seconds. I thought it would fade after a while, but it didn't. It was like the pattern had attached itself to me, a quiet echo that followed wherever I went. At night, I lay awake listening to the apartment. The pipes, the traffic, the faint rustle of her turning in the other room. Each sound folded into the next until I couldn't tell them apart. I stopped trying. Some mornings she spoke to me as if from a distance, her voice soft, cautious. She said I seemed calmer. I didn't correct her. Calm was a kind word for what I felt. The truth was closer to absence. I moved through the rooms like a visitor. I touched objects without recognizing their texture. Even my reflection looked uncertain, as if it hadn't caught up with me. I started sitting by the window for hours, just watching the street. People came and went. Cars slowed, lights changed. All of it happened without urgency. There was something peaceful in that. I began to feel like part of the scenery. No one looked up, and I liked that. One evening, she came to the doorway, said my name. I turned, slow. She looked different in the dim light, tired, maybe, or simply done. She asked if I was all right. I said yes. She waited for more. I didn't add anything. There was nothing left to explain. She nodded once and walked away. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, she still moved around me, still filled the space, but her presence no longer carried weight. We existed in parallel. The sound of her footsteps became another layer of the apartment's rhythm, no more or less important than the hum of the fridge. I liked it that way, predictable, contained. Nights grew longer. I started leaving the lights off. The dark felt cleaner, less crowded. Sometimes I'd hear her breathing through the wall, soft and steady. It reminded me of the monitors again, the faint reassurance that life continued somewhere nearby. That was enough. I didn't need more. I stopped opening the curtains during the day. The outside world had too many moving parts. I preferred the stillness. The clock ticked softly in the kitchen, and I began to match my breathing to it, even, consistent. I wrote nothing down anymore. I didn't need notes. The pattern was complete. Every sound, every silence, every pause had found its place. Sometimes she stood in the doorway as if about to say something. Then she'd turn away. I didn't follow her. I didn't ask. There was nothing new to learn from words. One morning, I woke before dawn. The air felt dense, like the moments before rain. The apartment was perfectly still. I listened for her movement, for any sign of life beyond the wall. Nothing. Only quiet. A pure, weightless quiet. It wasn't frightening. It was familiar. I realized then that silence didn't mean absence. It meant arrival. The final point where everything stops needing to be measured. I sat there for a long time, watching the thin line of light appear under the curtain. It cut across the floor, pale and indifferent. I thought of the hospital, the hum, the beeping, the half-second of darkness that had stayed with me. I understood it now. The silence wasn't an ending. It was a shape that fit perfectly around what remained. I didn't need to hold on to it. It was already here, steady and whole. When she woke later, she found me by the window, eyes open, calm. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. She asked if I wanted breakfast. I shook my head. She hesitated, then nodded, turning toward the kitchen. Her footsteps faded down the hall. The refrigerator hummed again. Outside, a car door closed. The city exhaled. I listened. The rhythm was exact, even, continuous. I felt no difference between the sounds anymore. Everything moved together, seamless and quiet. It was all part of the same stillness now.